Many moons ago, before this channel ever existed or COVID-19 was a thing, my good buddy Brent traveled from a far-off land of Goobertown to join me in the Great White North for a good old-fashioned hangout, and we dined on the finest of cheeseburgers. And while he was here, Brent and I continued the age-old tradition amongst miniature painters, where we gift unto each other a precious miniature. And in this situation, Brent gifted to me this amazing, rare, out-of-print, genuine Games Workshop 54mm Inquisitor Eisenhorn. But alas, the miniature sat unpainted on my great pile of shame for well over a year. I wanted to display it on my shelf to look back fondly to the memories that Brent and I made and looking forward to future memories together. But every time I saw it, I felt overwhelmed by the dozens of hours that I knew I would have to commit to do this great miniature justice. But today I'm going to change all that. I will paint Inquisitor Eisenhorn start to finish in one day, just to determine if you do in fact face regret for speed painting a model that is precious to you. I've been having a lot of fun speed painting in a more gritty, grim, dark style lately, so that's what we'll be doing today. I'm not worried about perfect blends, but I do use a few techniques to create some contrast quickly. I've shown wet blending in prior videos, but it's just such a valuable tool for applying base coats. I just follow the guide to my zenithal primer has given me while placing the dark colors in the shadows and the bright colors in the highlights. Then, with a clean, fairly dry brush, I swish back and forth where the colors meet and create a quick blend. The more I blend into the brighter color, the more I can darken it down, should it become too stark. Because of this, I tend to work with very bright colors for the highlight color. I know I can always bring them down if I need to. The important thing is to work with thick paint directly out of the bottle. This way it's not too thin and dries too fast before we can start our blends. And don't worry if the blend isn't perfect on the first pass. You can go back in a second or third time to build up the desired effect. One of the reasons that I'm really liking combining speed painting and grimdark style painting lately is because they both benefit from the fact that we just want to focus on a couple of really important aspects of the model. Everything else, we're not going to give a whole lot of time or attention to. For Eisenhorn, I wanted to focus on three areas: his green shoulder pads, his classic red overcoat, and of course, his face. The face is almost always one of those areas that you're going to spend more time and energy on when painting your models, especially if you're going to phone it in other areas. I decided that instead of wet blending this whole overcoat, I'd mix burnt red and black for a very dark color for the deepest shadows, and then that same red mixed with only a little black for everything else. I knew that I was going to need to build up the intensity of this red over multiple layers, so this felt like the quicker way to achieve some great shadows while I build up that full coverage. To make this red start to pop, I came back in with pure burnt red to start building up those highlights. In big sections, like on the back of the coat, I use feathering. I place the color down, then I quickly clean the brush and use that damp brush to swish back and forth on the edges of the paint and have it fade into the sections around it. The cool thing about wet blending and feathering is that if you know one of these techniques, you know how to do the other one. In both situations, we're taking a clean brush and we're just kind of blending the edges. The only difference is, in wet blending, you're actually blending the edges of the colors together, and in feathering, you're just blending that edge of color next to the dry areas of paint around it so it fades into those colors. I mix in some bold pyro red with my burnt red to boost the brightness even more. And for smaller sections, like all the folds around the arms, I just layer the paint on. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of extra time getting perfect blends here. just finding time to layer paint on and get it on quick is a good thing. I find that in any mini that I'm trying to work on a new technique or practice on something new, that I don't do that for the whole miniature. I want to balance that. I want a yin and yang between trying something new and also completing the model in a quick time frame. When I got to the shoulder pads, I immediately had that moment of realization. This looks like goddamn Christmas colors. And in those moments, I find that instead of just scrapping our whole color plan and starting from scratch, to improvise, to problem solve. Think about how I can make this look less like Christmas without having to redo what I've done so far. I decided to just keep the green fairly desaturated, so I highlighted up with an off-white instead of pushing the green even more to accentuate the green and red combo. This also fits well with our goal of keeping a more desaturated look for a finished model. If you paint Warhammer models, or any miniatures really, you're going to have to paint your share of skulls. So it's good to have your own recipe for skulls and bones in your back pocket. For me, I like to use Rucksack Tan by P3 as kind of my base starting point. The reason why is it's a nice yellowy brown that gives that kind of old skull feel. And you can always go up to a brighter bleach skull, still with using the same color, or keep it nice and dark and gritty. When we get to the metallics, I remind myself I don't need to be spending a lot of time on these. So I just grab a darker shade of silver and gold and just base coat directly on the model. We'll do some things later to make these pop a little bit, but this is about just getting through those parts of the model quickly that are on our areas of focus. One way that I've learned that helps me speed up my painting in general, specifically if I'm trying for a speed paint project, is to, whenever I can, use the paints that are already on my palette. So when I got to Eisenhorn's skin tone, I just grabbed some reds, off-whites, and browns and mixed them together until I got an irritated skin tone. Human skin has such a wide variety of tones and colors in it, and so I had a big aha moment when one day I just stopped looking for bottles of paint that said skin on them and started looking at the colors that my eye sees. Suddenly, taking the labels off my paint pots and grabbing based on the colors I need has helped me improve my skin painting game. Eisenhorn's head has this wonderful dramatic sculpt. It's tilted slightly down and has a pronounced craggy brow. I'm going to try to accentuate those, going brighter than I'm comfortable with. I want a nice, pale, almost sickly skin, leading you to wonder what kind of sunless environment he's been living in while performing his inquisitory missions. When Brent gave me this model, it was already completely built, primed, and even zenithal primed with white from above. So it wasn't until this very moment that I realized I didn't do anything to the base. I didn't put anything on it, so what do we do? Of course, we could go back in and put some more texture, some dirt, or some rocks on there and build a base, but I'm too lazy for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to build a little atmosphere with those colors already on my palette. I'm just going to put them all over the place, wet blend them together, and make them feel like he's in some dark environment. Before I get to the most fun step in this whole project, I looked at his sword cane blade and decided it needed a little bit more oomph to it to sell at its true metal. So I created some natural shadows where the light would be not reflecting as brightly, and I took some pure black paint and feathered those out to create that shadow. To quickly, and I do mean quickly, pull this whole model together to sell its dirty, grimdark setting, I'll be dousing the entire thing in a dark brown enamel wash. This stuff is just so much superior to acrylic washes when it comes to creating a big impact without spoiling all of the painting you've done thus far. I mean, don't get me wrong, at first it does look like you've ruined this entire model. But the thing about enamels and oils is they're so easy to remove. So we can remove it where we don't want it to be, and we have a lot more control over our final product compared to acrylic washes. I'll be rubbing off much of the wash, and to start I use a dirty old makeup sponge to clean off the large areas. I'm not worried about this part being perfect, it just lets me work quick. If I were painting a smaller model, I'd skip this initial part. Next, I take a small double-sided makeup sponge and dip one side in mineral spirits. I also use mineral spirits to clean the paintbrush I use to apply the enamel wash. Oh, I've got a link in the video description for these makeup sponges so you can get a buttload of them for super cheap. You can check that out. The sponge side with mineral spirits will entirely remove the wash, while the dry side of the sponge is more like a buffer tool, taking away some of the wash but leaving the surface still tinted brown. They work perfectly in tandem. I remove all of the wash from one area, then buff around that now clean area to blend the fully cleaned and still stained areas. We could certainly stop our paint job here and it'd look pretty darn good. In fact, if I was fielding an entire army of Eisenhorns, that's what I'd do. But we're making good time today. So instead, we're going to push this for a couple more final steps. These will boost our contrast and really push the drama of this project. Again, for these final steps, I'm going to spend most of my time worrying about the most important areas: the face, the coat, and the shoulder pads. Before I highlighted the metals, I felt like they weren't quite weathered enough. So I broke out another lovely enamel product that creates a dry, crusty looking rust when it dries. When I'm highlighting the metals, I make sure I don't create a nice, smooth, clean edge highlight. I like to dot the brush as it goes across the edge and create some tiny little scratches as well. This will sell the effect that this is a worn and used item. My final step is to paint these shoulder flashlights. And to do that, I'm going to come in with my airbrush. But first, I'm going to take pure white paint and paint over those lenses. Then with a couple of quick spurts of ink, I can get them nice and red with a little bit of glow hitting the surfaces around it. I then repeat this step. But the second time with the white, I don't paint the whole lens. I just create a little bit bigger of a dot there. I then spray it all red again. My final step is to then go with pure white right on a nice little reflection on the lens. I was worried that I was going to feel regret after only spending about 3 hours on this paint job. Regret that I didn't do a good enough job and I didn't give it the amount of time that it deserved. Or regret that maybe Brent would feel bad that he gave me a model and I screwed it up by painting it so fast. But you know what? We often take some of our favorite models and we put them up on this podium that says, I'll get to it one day when I'm a great painter. Or I'll get to it when I can commit dozens and dozens of hours to it. Do not wait for that day. Paint those miniatures. You'll turn back and you'll say, you know, maybe it could have been a little bit better, but I'm really proud of what I did. And you went further on your journey and you got better as a painter in the process. So now I know that this model will no longer sit in my pile of shame, but it'll join in my wonderful display case, so every time I see it, I can think fondly of my good buddy Brent. Thank you for hanging out today, especially you subscribers. I really hope that you liked this video. If you do like what I do and want to support me, you can always check out my Patreon in the link below and check out the fun rewards that I offer when hanging out with me in the painting dojo. Also, you could just pick up a sweet Ninjon shirt over at ninjon.net. Thanks once again. Be good to each other. And I'll see you next time. Shoulder pants. Contrast and overall dramatic feel. Dramatic feel.